We are now up on what we call the Muhlenberg line. So this is the left flank of the outer line of Washington's defenses during the winter of 1777 and 1778. So they start here with his first cabin under General Muhlenberg, who was a general from Virginia. His father was a minister in our local area, up in Collegeville area, in a little place called Trapp, Pennsylvania, which is about 3 miles from here. So this is the left flank, and this is what the huts were supposed to look like. Washington sent out direct orders on December 20th that the men were to build the huts 14 by 16. They were to have 12 sleeping per hut, a fireplace in the back, a door in the front for the draft. The enlisted men were to have their huts in front, systematically in order. The officers were to be sporadically behind the enlisted men's huts, and they were to look out towards Philadelphia. If we look out here, this is Philadelphia is this way, and so the huts were supposed to be here. The men were to dig a trench across the road here, which did not exist at the time, and keep their eye out on Philadelphia in case the British came out of Philadelphia. Again, this is what the huts were supposed to look like. No hut looked like this. The men are simply building a hut any way they want. They are not systematically lined up. They are not aligned. Washington sends the orders out. No one is really paying attention to General Washington as having an authority, because he's really not the commanding officer of the Army yet. He is a name, but Congress hasn't given that authority yet. So the men are only listening to their militia officers and not really paying attention to the severity of Washington's orders. It's the equivalent, when we're teachers, to having a substitute teacher come in the classroom. So the men are getting in, trying to build as quickly as possible. Some of the men dug down. Some of the men only made huts about 5 or 6 feet high. They certainly were not packed. And this is a red clay area. You can pack these huts with red clay. It becomes very, very hard. But this is 20th century, 21st century models of what the huts were supposed to look like. And if you looked up this line during the winter, the huts are scattered all over the place, and nothing is systematic, and no hut looks the same. So these huts are drafty. These huts are small and large, and it looked like Kansas after the tornado, because no one is really paying attention and taking Washington's orders seriously as the commander-in-chief. When this is in about 6 weeks' time, there are 900 huts beginning here on the left, all the way up past the arch, all the way up to the General Wayne Monument, which is the Pennsylvania line. So they cut straight across, and there's a little over 900 huts here. So within a few weeks, there are no trees up here. All the trees are cut down. There are no fence rails up here. They're all using them to begin to build their huts. If they had built these huts properly, several years ago during the winter, a few of the Rangers came up here in February, which is the coldest part of our Northeast winters. They opened up one of these huts, they started a fire, and when the hut warmed up, it got to be 70 degrees and stayed that way. So when Washington gave these orders for what these huts were supposed to look like, these men would not have suffered in the cold if they had obeyed the orders, but they did not at first. So you're 12 men to a hut. No one has their own bunk. You go to sleep, you simply go into your hut, you grab some straw, you lay it on one of the flat beds, boards in there, and you put your blanket down and you go to sleep. 6 men were on duty for 12 hours. 6 men were off duty, and they could sleep for 12 hours, and they would disperse it back and forth. And again, they're looking out towards Philadelphia. There's a trench across here, and a long trench from this line all the way up to the Wayne line, which is over a mile, and they're simply watching to see if the British come out of Philadelphia. General Howe, during the winter, never came out of Philadelphia. In April of 1778, General Howe had enough of the revolution. He asked to resign his commission and go back to Great Britain. He was allowed to go back, and immediately he is court-martialed. In this time period, folks, court-martial was very common because they want to find out really what happened. There is no 24-hour day news. There is no video camera. So Howe is court-martialed, and during his proceedings, he was asked, why didn't you defeat the Americans? Howe said, I took their capital, I defeated Washington's army. But this revolution is not a physical geographical location, nor is it a city. This revolution is in the hearts and the minds of the colonists, and no one will ever be able to defeat that. And Howe was absolutely right. The other reason Howe said he didn't come out here, because Washington has the high ground. This is high ground, and even though Washington's army is weakened, if you look behind me, you can see that the British army coming up this hill, marching up this hill, would be an absolute slaughter for the British army. And if you remember, Howe led the attack on Breed's Hill, on militia that had built a redoubt overnight. And it was a major disaster for the British army at Breed's Hill, and Howe always remembered that. Howe lost 40% of his men on Breed's Hill with a redoubt that was built overnight. And he was never going to do that again. So Washington picks the high ground. He is on the high ground, and even in a weakened state, General Howe is not coming out here to ever take on Washington's army in the midst of a winter.